Good morning, everyone. It's Lynn Dunn from Stamptastic Designs. Thanks so much for joining me today. So, I want to share a couple card ideas with you, some vintage style cards that were inspired by one of the projects in the Stampin' Up mini catalog. So, of course, I love paper tearing and I really do love the look of vintage. So, I saw some of the paper tearing on one of the samples and thought I would recreate it my way and share it with you today. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So, I've been playing around with the Nature's Harvest stamp set. So, it's a stamp set and a bundle and die set, I guess. Oops, all my dies fell off. But I keep my dies on the inside here on a little magnetic sheet. So, these are all the dies that coordinate with this particular stamp set. So I'm going to share a couple project ideas with you today. And I did put a link in the description with this video to some projects that I shared on Wednesday. So in case you missed those, you can find the link to get some measurements and ideas on these particular cards. So these are the cards I shared on Wednesday in a video. So it has a fun little angle design. So the link to that particular video is in the description with this one. But today we're going to focus on these vintage style cards. And I'm using soft succulent as kind of my background here for my card base. And then some of the other colors are Daffodil Delight and Calypso Coral. And then, of course, a little bit of Crumb Cake. And then our bumblebee color kind of in the background. So let me show you how to make these. I have two cards actually that we're going to make from cutting out one particular little die here. So I'm going to show you how to make these two first. And then this card was actually inspired by a mystery stamping session that I had with my team this past week. So I'll show you how to make that. So good morning, everybody. So, as you know, I love paper tearing and I love the kind of vintage or worn look when I'm creating cards. So, that was why I kind of put these cards together. So, what I'm using is I have a soft succulent card base. So, this is just your standard card base. It's 5.5 by 8.5. And then I score it in the middle at 4.25 inches. That's how I create the base. I'm just going to set that aside for the moment. And then the next thing I did is I just cut a piece of designer paper. Now, the cards I'm sharing with you today, you can really use these layouts with any supplies that you have on hand. I love the look with this current bundle, but of course, it'll work with any supplies. So you want to cut a 5.25 by 4 inch piece of pattern paper. So I'm using one of the prints from the Harvest Meadow Designer Series paper pack. So it has the little scripting, the little words on here, and then it has this yellow on the back. So the one of the projects I saw in the catalog had this little bit of paper tearing. I did a little more paper tearing than the project in the catalog. But all we're going to do is just tear this piece. We're going to add a couple torn pieces to this particular piece of designer paper. So the one in the catalog had just little torn pieces like this off the side. So you just kind of have to take your time and just slowly tear so that you get a little worn look like that on your, if you're using cardstock or designer paper, you just want that little worn area. So I got that torn. And then what I'm going to do is just take some crumb cake ink and I'm going to do a little bit of sponging. So besides the torn look, you can just take some ink, and I like using crumb cake because it's the lighter of the browns, and it just kind of gives you that look, that vintage style look. So I just go all the way around the paper. So you can already see the difference between the two. Just kind of defines it a little bit more. So So just a little bit of paper tearing and then a little bit of sponging with some ink, and you have that worn or vintage style look. So that's what the paper looks like. And then I'm also going to do the same thing on my little designer series paper here, this little piece. This is the piece that's going to go right across the center. So it's 3/4 inches by 4. So we'll just do the top part of that. And since we're sponging and paper tearing, of course, I have a 1 by 4 inch piece of crumb cake cardstock. So I'm just going to tear this in half here, and we'll save one of the pieces for the next card. And then I'm just going to sponge this. So you can see how it defines that torn paper and just kind of makes it stand out a little bit more. Okay, so let's bring this back. So what I'm going to do is just adhere these pieces right to my card front. And see how it really kind of makes it pop. Once you get it on the card, you can really see the, sponging that we did. And then I'm just going to add this little piece. Now, the cool thing about this particular card design is that you can actually make 6 of these cards out of one 12 by 12 inch piece of designer paper, because you're going to cut your designer paper at 5 1/4 by 4. So you can cut your 12-inch piece into 4-inch wide strips, and then you can get 2. Oops, hang on one second. I can't talk and do this at the same time. And then you can get 2 pieces out of one 4-inch strip, and then you use the leftover piece on the bottom. You cut it into 3/4 inches wide, and then you'll have 2 little yellow strips for your card. So you can use actually an entire piece of pattern paper to make 6 of these. So just a little tip for you. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in some scrap paper here. Let's move this out of the way. I have to create our focal point for the card. So I'm using this large image from the Nature's Harvest stamp set. And we're going to stamp this right in the middle of this kind of label die shape. So this is one of the dies from the Hippo and Friends die set. I tend to be using this a lot lately. So I just inked this up with black Memento ink, because I'm going to do a little bit of coloring with my Stampin' Blends. Now you can color it with whatever you want, but I like my Stampin' Blends because they're quick and easy. So I'm just going to add just like a little bit of Calypso Coral on the top, and just kind of add little bits throughout these other flowers. And then I'm going to take my Daffodil Delight and just kind of go over and blend this a little bit. So the nice thing about this is it doesn't take much to color this in. There we go. And then I'm using a little bit of ivory. You can use ivory or crumb cake just to color the tops of my flowers here. And then since I'm using soft succulent, I'm using the soft succulent blends just to add the color to the leaves. So right now I'm just adding little bits of the dark into my leaves. And then I'm going to take the light white, and I'll just run that over the top, and it just blends in really nicely. So kind of gives you like that two-tone look because you have the dark and the light mixed together. So even if you are not too keen on coloring, these are actually not too bad to color. The most challenging is the stem. There we go. Now, if you don't, if you don't prefer to use the stamping blends, you can use watercolor pencils. You can do a little sponging. You can also just leave it as is and stamp it in a color instead of stamping it in black. You don't have to do the coloring on it. And we're almost done. There we go. Okay, so that's what it looks like when you use the blends. Let me get this out of the way. We'll bring back our card. Okay, so now that I have my focal point created, I'm just going to add some dimensionals here, and we'll pop this up. So the other thing about using the blends, as you can see, they do bleed through onto the back. So I recommend using them on pieces that you're going to layer on the card, because then you won't soak through your card front. And then the last thing we'll add, oops, I got to just grab this. Last thing we'll add is just a little greeting. So I'm adding just a little bit of glue to one side, and I have a dimensional on the other, just to pop this up right here. There we go. Oop, I added that crooked. Nice thing about glue is you can straighten it out. Okay, and then the last thing I did is just add one of these little bumblebee trinkets. I thought they went really well with this particular stamp set and design. So just gotta add one of these with a glue dot. And then the other thing you can do is just tie a little bit of trim. This is linen thread. You can just tie that around the entire card. So I tied it around the entire card front, and that just adds a little bit more, but they look good either way. So that's the first card. So then I'm going to show you the second one, because what I did here is I'm using the negative space on the second one. Let me just grab my piece of paper. So when I cut out this die shape, I cut it out from the center of a piece of, this is a 5 1/4 by 4-inch piece of white cardstock. So I cut out that die shape, and then I used this negative space on this card to create this look. So let me move this out of the way. So again, I'm using the soft succulent for the base of my card. And then here's the outline from where I cut that die shape that I used on the previous card. Except for this time, I embossed the front of the card. I don't know if you can see it yet, but you will in a minute. I embossed the front of the card. I'm going to bring back my paper with one of the new embossing folders. It's called Time Worn. It's Time Worn Type 3D embossing folder. So I embossed it, and now I'm going to actually sponge it. So all I do is just lightly take my crumb cake ink and sponge across, just to kind of bring out the embossing a little bit so that you can see it better. And this gives it a really nice worn look, of course, a nice vintage style look. Now, if you don't like the vintage style look, of course, you don't have to add you know, this little sponging that I'm doing. You can just use the embossing as is. You can just use it white and just leave off the crumb cake ink. All right, so that should be good. Bring this back. So now you can see the difference there, and this will just get popped up on the card. So the next thing I did is just cut a few little pieces here. So let me grab those. So I have a little piece. This is a 1 by 4 inch piece of, this is the same pattern that I used on the other card. I'm just using the reverse side. So this is a piece of designer paper from that Harvest Meadow DSP. So I'm just gonna add, oops, actually I want this on the bottom. Just gonna add a little bit on the bottom. So we'll add this first. So I'm gonna put this right across the bottom here. And then we're gonna add that torn piece from the first card that I showed you. This is just the leftover piece. A little bit of glue on my finger. So we'll add this on here. So I'm basically just layering all these pieces together. And then I just have a 1/2 inch wide piece of designer paper that I'm going to add across here. So it's a 1/2 inch by 4. And we'll just put that across like that. All right, I think we got it. So now we'll just give this a second to dry. So now what I'm going to do is I already have my little focal point already colored in. So I just did the same type of coloring that I just showed you with the Stampin' Blends. And then this is going to go right in the center of this. I'm going to adhere it right to my card front. Just going to wait a second here. Maybe I didn't get enough glue under there. I don't think I got enough glue under here. Now I do. No, it's coming out. There we go. Okay. So let me put some dimensionals on the back of this. So I'm going to pop this up. And then when I adhere that little piece on the inside, it'll give it some nice depth and dimension. I'll put like that. All right, so that is our frame. So let's add this. So that's popped up on the card. Now we can take this and we can just add a little bit of glue. So with the Hippo and Friends dies, there's 3 different sizes of this particular label. So you can just use a smaller, I used the smallest label in the center here and the largest one to cut this out. But there's like a medium size one too. So you can add that. And then this time I think I might add this over on the side just to change it up a little bit. May as well. We'll add that over on the side. And then of course you can add another little embellishment. There. So I just added that little bee with a a glue dot. And then I just tied a little bit of twine around the front, the entire front of the card, and created my little bow. So there's a great way to use that negative space. So when you cut out these, label dies, whatever kind of dies you're using, whether you're using circles or in this case, this label shape, just cut it out in the center of a piece of, white cardstock like I did here, and then you'll be able to create two cards simply by cutting out that one die. So just kind of fun. Okay, so that is the second card. And then this last card is a card that where is it? We actually created this card as part of our mystery stamping session. So I do some mystery stamping with my team, and one of my team members gave us the measurements for this card. So basically, we all used the exact same measurements, but came up with completely different cards. So this is the card that I created for my mystery stamping, and I thought it would be fun to share it with the vintage style. So that's what I have here. So basically, we're starting with, that soft, succulent cardstock for the base of our card. And then this first piece of designer paper that I cut is 3 by 4 1/4. And I'm just adding that kind of like right out of the corner here. And then we have some 1.5 by 4 1/4 inch pieces of crumb cake cardstock. And then this one is, I don't remember off the top of my head. I gotta look. This one is 2.5 by 4 1/4, I believe. Oh, I don't think I cut these down to 4 1/4. I gotta cut those quick. Sorry about that. I thought they looked a little long. Okay, so they're all 4 1/4 long. So this one is 2.5 by 4 1/4. So basically what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to do my sponging just to add that vintage style. And we'll add some here. So this is a great way to use up some pieces. If you like to do a lot of layering, this is a great layering card. And we'll just add some sponging on here. So with my designer paper, I'm really just using the front and back. So you can see the yellow is the piece that I put here. And then this green soft succulent is the piece that I'm going to showcase. So I'm going to add some glue, and we'll add it to our little crumb cake. So what I'm really doing is just staggering these off of this piece of designer paper, just to give it a fun look. And then we'll just add them to the card. So I put this designer series paper piece up out of the upper left corner, and then I kind of came off the lower right with this focal point here. And then of course you just add your focal point, whatever you want to use. Of course I'm using this floral. So I'll just add that right here. So I'm using a slightly larger, this is the medium size label die from that particular set. And then we'll just add our little greeting. And then of course you can add some twine in your little embellishments. So this little label die here that I'm using, this actually comes in that Nature's Harvest stamp set, or that bundle. So it fits perfect for the little thank you. And then the last thing we'll add is this. I will spare you the tying of all that twine. because it does take a little bit to add the twine, but there you go. So it actually looks good with or without the twine, but I like the twine. It adds a little bit more, um, kind of adds to that vintage style. So, all right, so let me move these out of the way. I'll bring these back. These are all the cards that I shared with you today, and I will have these out on my blog. I do currently have these cards out on my blog. So this is the angle card design. It's kind of a really unique yet super simple design to create. So this is out on my blog. Be sure to check that out. I did link to it in the description with this video. And then I'll get all the measurements out there for these cards later today. So I hope you guys enjoyed these cards. I had a lot of fun putting these together. Like I said, I love the vintage style. So this was right up my alley. So have a wonderful day, everybody, and I will talk to you again next week. Take care.